People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And sometimes we don't even understand why we do what we do. Simon Sinek, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Let's begin with a question. Have you ever had something good, a relationship, an opportunity, even a compliment, and you pushed it away? Maybe not intentionally, maybe not even consciously, but somehow you distanced yourself from it. Start with why, understand the root cause. Why do we push things or people away in the first place? Let's talk about something we rarely pause to examine, why we push things away. And I don't mean pushing away a plate of food because we're full or pushing away a chair because it's in the way. I mean those things, those moments, those people, those opportunities, that could mean something, that could change everything. And yet we resist them. We distance ourselves. Sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, sometimes so subtly we don't even realize it until it's already gone. But I believe we must always start with why, not what we do, not how we do it. Why, that's the place from which clarity, awareness, and ultimately freedom begins. Because if you understand your why, you don't just understand your behavior, you understand yourself. And when you understand yourself, you gain the power to choose differently. So why do we push things away? It's not because we're bad people. It's not because we don't care. And it's certainly not because we want to live a lonely or unfulfilled life. No. The real answer, the one that lives beneath the excuses and the rationalizations, is almost always this: we're afraid, not of the thing we're pushing away, but of what it might mean to let it in, to let it stay, to let it transform us. When we push things away, what we're really doing is protecting something. But here's the twist. Most of the time, we don't even know what that something is. It's old. It's buried. It's unconscious. It could be the fear of being hurt again, the fear of not being enough, the fear of succeeding and then losing it all, the fear that if we open the door to something real, something powerful, something meaningful, it might expose the parts of us we've worked so hard to hide. So we don't just push away the bad, we push away the good too. We say no to the opportunity because we don't believe we deserve it. We ghost the person who cares about us because the intimacy is too raw, too confronting. We ignore the compliment because receiving it would mean confronting a self-image that doesn't match the one we've held on to for years. That's the tragic irony of the human experience. We crave connection, but when it shows up, we question it. We doubt it. We inspect it from a distance like it's too good to be true. And then we push it away, not because we don't want it, but because we want it so badly it scares us. And that's where the why becomes crucial. Because if you don't understand why you do this, you'll keep doing it. You'll call it instinct. You'll call it common sense. You'll say, I'm just not ready, or it's just not the right time. But underneath all of that, that's fear talking. That's an internal story that hasn't been challenged in years. Some of us learned early in life that love comes with conditions. That vulnerability leads to rejection. That success invites envy or disappointment. That opening up means opening ourselves to pain. And our nervous system remembers that. Even when we forget the event, the message remains imprinted. Don't get too close. Don't dream too big. Don't let anyone see you. And so we live small, we protect ourselves, we push things away. Now I'm not here to tell you to open your arms to everything and everyone without discernment. No, boundaries are necessary. Discernment is wisdom. But there's a big difference between a healthy no and a defensive reflex. One comes from alignment. The other comes from fear. And the tragedy is most of us can't tell the difference because we've never stopped long enough to ask ourselves why. So let me ask you, when was the last time you pushed something away and regretted it later? When was the last time you told yourself, if I had just taken the chance, if I had just let it in? That moment, that hesitation, that inner recoil, it came from somewhere. And if you want to live with more clarity, more authenticity, more fulfillment, you have to go back to that place. You have to trace the thread. What were you really afraid of? Not the surface answer, the real one, the core fear, the hidden belief. I'll tell you something I learned the hard way. Most self-sabotage isn't a lack of discipline. It's a lack of self-trust. We don't trust ourselves to survive the outcome. So we push things away to avoid the risk. But that also means we avoid the reward. We never give ourselves the chance to prove what we're capable of enduring or achieving. And if you never test your limits, you'll always live beneath them. Not because you can't rise, but because you never even let the challenge in the door. That's why I say again, start with why. Don't judge yourself for pushing things away. Don't shame yourself. That gets you nowhere. Instead, get curious, get compassionate. Ask, what was I trying to protect? And even deeper, where did I learn to do that? Because you weren't born pushing things away. You learned it. And if you learned it, you can unlearn it. And I know that sounds simple, but it's not easy. Because looking at your why means facing things you've avoided, feelings you've suppressed, moments you've minimized. But what you'll find on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Not just freedom to say yes to the right things, but freedom to stop living in fear of the wrong ones. So if you've been pushing away the love, the opportunity, the challenge, the truth, ask yourself why. If your instinct is to retreat, pause. If your reaction is to numb, notice. Because those moments are windows, openings. And if you're brave enough to look through them, you'll see something that was always there, a version of you that isn't afraid to receive, to grow, to expand, to belong. Not just to others, but to yourself. Because that's the real why. We push things away not because we fear them, but because we've been taught to fear us, our needs, our worth, our desires. And when you stop fearing yourself, when you understand yourself, when you own your why, that's when everything begins to change. The biology of avoidance, how the human brain is wired to protect us from perceived threats or discomfort. Let's talk about the thing most of us never even see coming, how our biology, the very structure of our brain, is working against us when we try to move towards something good. You see, people think self-sabotage is purely psychological, but what most don't realize is that it's biological. There's a system, ancient, primal, always, and incredibly powerful, that was built to protect you. It doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about one thing, survival. And its name is the Y amygdala. Now, imagine this, you're standing on the edge of something big, a new relationship, a big opportunity, an honest conversation, a moment where you have to open your heart or take a risk, and suddenly your chest tightens, your palms sweat, your thoughts start spinning. Always. What if it doesn't work? What if they leave? What if I fail? Or worse, what if I succeed and it still hurts? And without knowing how, you take a step back, you shit down, you push it away, and you tell yourself, it just wasn't right. But deep down, you know it was fear. Fear that came out of nowhere, fear that felt bigger than you. That fear has a name. And no, it's not weakness. It's not cowardice. It's your neurobiology. You are literally wired to avoid pain. Your brain, specifically your limbic system, has one job to keep you alive. And it does that by constantly scanning your environment for anything that feels like a threat. Now, here's the twisting. It doesn't differentiate between physical danger and emotional risk. To your brain, standing in front of someone you love, telling them how much they mean to you, that feels just as threatening as standing in front of a lion. Let me say that again. Your brain treats vulnerability like it treats mortal danger. Why? Because once upon a time, being rejected was dangerous. Being cast out from your tribe meant death. Being different meant being alone. And that fear has been inherited generation after generation like a psychological family heirloom. So today, even though the lion isn't chasing you, even though you're not about to get exiled from the village, your nervous system still responds like you're in danger when all you're really doing is trying to be seen. It's wild, isn't it? That something as beautiful as love, as expansive as growth, as sacred as truth, can activate the same circuitry as danger. But it does. And once you understand that, you start to forgive yourself for pulling away. You realize you're not broken. You're wired, but wiring can be rewired. That's the gift of being human. Let me break it down even further. The amygdala's job is to trigger the flight, freeze, or fawn response when it perceives threat. And it does so automatically before your conscious mind even gets a say. So let's say you grew up in a home where emotional expression was punished, or where perfection was expected, or where love was inconsistent. Your amygdala learned connection is not safe. Being seen is not safe. Opening up is dangerous. So when someone gets close, alarm bells, when an opportunity asks you to show up and be seen. Sirens, your entire body starts screaming, "God, run." Gog, and here's where the most painful part kicks in it. ETA feels like intuition. It feels like your gut saying, no, when really it's your trauma saying, not again. So now you're in a cycle. Push away. Regret it. Blame yourself. Then do it again. Not because you want to, because your brain thinks it's saving your life. But let me ask you something. God always. How many times has it actually saved you? How many times did pulling away actually protect you from anything real? Or did it just protect you from the possibility of discomfort? You see, your brain wants certainty, predictability, familiarity. That's where it feels safe. But the problem is, so many of us grew up with dysfunction, rejection, or pain as our baseline. So now that's what feels familiar. So when something healthy shows up, respect, love, opportunity, it feels off, like a glitch. It doesn't match the blueprint. And so the amygdala says, nope, too risky, push it away. This is why people self-sabotage in relationships that are good for them. This is why people turn down opportunities they had dreamed of. This is why we stay stuck in patterns we hate, because our biology is trying to keep us inside a reality we say we want to escape from. God always, the truth is we don't fear change, we fear the unknown. And your nervous system would rather stay in familiar pain than risk unfamiliar joy. That's how deep the programming goes. But here's what no one tells you: you can interrupt the pattern. You can retrain your nervous system. You can teach your brain that safety doesn't come from hiding. It comes from you healing. It comes from showing up, from standing in the discomfort and realizing, this feeling won't kill me. And when you survive it once, something amazing happens. Your brain starts to, we trust you. Your body starts to relax. The alarm bells get quieter. And slowly, always, you stop pushing everything away before it has a chance to bloom. But that only happens when you stop reacting automatically and start responding intentionally. That moment, when the fear rises, when your body wants to pull back, when your mind starts crafting excuses, that is your moment of power. That is the place where transformation begins. Because now, instead of obeying the fear, you question it. You ask, is this danger or is this growth? And I'm telling you, the moment you ask that question, really ask it with your heart open and your mind clear, you create space. Space to choose differently. Space to stay when you would run. Space to speak when you would have stayed silent. Space to let in what you have pushed away. This is how we break the cycle, not by fighting the fear, not by shaming ourselves for feeling it, but by understanding it, by remembering that the fear is a message, not a mandate. It's a signal, not a sentence. And once you see that, you no longer have to obey it. God always, you can breathe through it. Stay present. Let the feeling rise and fall like a wave. And on the other side of that wave is a freedom, the freedom to receive what you truly want. That's what it means to work with your biology instead of against it. That's what it means to reclaim your power. Because you are not just a bundle of reflexes. You are not just a product of your past. You are consciousness. You are will. You are choice. And when you step into that awareness, you don't just stop pushing things away. You start letting life in. Fear vs. protection distinguish between pushing things away out of fear versus doing so for healthy boundaries. Let's sit with this idea. God always, not everything you push away is bad, and not everything you let in is good. That sounds simple, but most people never stop long enough to feel the full weight of what that really means. You see, there's this critical misunderstanding we carry deep in our subconscious that if we're avoiding something, it must be dangerous. That if we're saying no, we must be protecting ourselves. That pulling away always equals wisdom. That closing the door is self-respect. God always. But that's not always true, is it? Sometimes we're not protecting ourselves. We're paralyzing ourselves. God always. Sometimes we're not drawing a boundary. We're building a wall. Sometimes we call it discernment, but in reality, it's just fear wearing a mask. And fear is clever. It never shows up shouting, "I'm here to sabotage your life." No, it whispers, it mimics your voice. It sounds like logic. It sounds like, "I just need more time." It sounds like, "They wouldn't understand me anyway." It sounds like, "This opportunity isn't quite right." But what it's really saying is, "I don't trust myself to handle what comes next." So we say no. We withdraw. We avoid. And the whole time we tell ourselves we're being smart. But the truth is, a lot of what we label as protection is actually just fear in disguise. God always, you've got to learn to ask yourself one of the most important questions you'll ever ask in your life. Is this a boundary I'm setting out of strength or a defense I'm creating out of fear? Because one comes from alignment and the other comes from survival. One says, "I know who I am and what I need." And the other says, "I'm terrified of being seen hurt, exposed, or disappointed again." Let me be clear, real boundaries are healthy. Real boundaries are rooted in love, love for self, love for others, love for peace. But fear-based avoidance is something else entirely. It's rooted in anticipation, anticipation of pain, anticipation of loss, anticipation of failure. Always, and here's where it gets dangerous. When you start anticipating pain before it happens, you begin designing your life around imaginary outcomes. God always. You begin running from futures that don't even exist yet. I've seen people push away love not because they weren't loved, God always, but because they didn't believe they were lovable. I've seen people abandon projects not because they lacked talent, God always, but because they couldn't bear the weight of potential criticism. I've seen people reject peace because it felt unfamiliar, God always. Do you understand how tragic that is? That we could reject joy because we're afraid it won't last. That we could walk away from what we want most just to avoid the possibility of losing it. And this is why the distinction between fear and protection matters so much. Because when you don't know the difference, you start cutting off parts of your own life under the illusion that you're taking care of yourself. Always, you think you're setting standards when really you're just setting traps. Traps that keep you stuck. Traps that keep you safe but small. So what do we do about it? We get honest, brutally, courageously, relentlessly honest. We ask God always, am I moving away from this because it's harmful to me or because it might challenge me in ways I don't feel ready for? You'd be amazed how often the answer is the latter. God always, because growth always feels like a threat before it becomes a breakthrough. That's just how the nervous system works. That's how ego protects itself. God always, that's how unhealed wounds stay alive. The first instinct isn't always the wisest. That's the hard part, right? We're told to trust our gut. We're told to listen to our body. And yes, absolutely, your body holds wisdom. but it also holds memory, and not all memory is truth. Some of it is trauma, some of it is distortion, some of it is outdated programming you never consented to, but inherited anyway. So sometimes your body says, run, not because there's danger, but because it remembers a time when something similar hurt you. But this isn't then, and they are not them, and you are not the same. Fear isn't bad, fear is information, but it's not instruction. Fear tells you, God always, pay attention, but it doesn't get to decide what you do next. That part is yours, that part is choice, and that's the gift. You may not be able to stop fear from rising, but you can stop it from ruling you. You can feel the signal without surrendering to it. God always, you can learn to sit in discomfort without self-destructing. God always. And maybe that's what maturity really is, learning to pause between the trigger and the response. God always. Learning to recognize when you're acting out of fear versus when you're acting out of truth. And choosing to hold steady. Choosing to stay open. Choosing to say, I see you fear. I hear you, but you don't get to drive this time. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped assuming that every strong emotion meant you needed to escape. God always. Imagine what you'd become if you stopped running every time something felt uncertain. God, what if you allowed yourself to be uncomfortable without labeling it unsafe? What if you could hold space for both? This feels hard, and this might be exactly what I need. You're allowed to change the story. You're allowed to examine your reflexes and rewrite the narrative. Just because fear helped you survive in the past doesn't mean it has to shape your future. God always. Just because pushing things away kept you from pain once doesn't mean it's the strategy that will lead you to peace. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away, ask, not reactively, not judgmentally, but gently and curiously. What am I trying to protect? And even deeper, what am I afraid will happen if I let this in? That question alone can unlock an entire new level of awareness. Because once you name the fear, you shrink its power. Once you see the pattern, you give yourself the option to disrupt it. God always. And that's where real change begins. Not in the absence of fear, but in your ability to rise above it. And if you've spent years convincing yourself that you're just being cautious or not rushing in anything, maybe it's time to ask yourself if that's really true, or if you've just gotten really good at convincing yourself that fear is wisdom, because wisdom doesn't shrink you. Wisdom stretches you. Wisdom calls you into alignment with who you could be, not who fear tells you you are. God always. The truth is, you were made to expand. You were made to open. And yes, that means sometimes it will hurt. Sometimes it won't work out. But pushing everything away doesn't protect you from pain. It just guarantees a different kind of suffering. A quiet, invisible, persistent kind. God always. The kind that comes from knowing you never gave yourself a real chance. So don't confuse fear with protection. Don't confuse avoidance with safety. And above all, don't confuse the voice of trauma with the voice of truth, because one will keep you stuck and the other will set you free. Fear versus protection. Distinguish between pushing things away out of fear versus doing so for healthy boundaries. Let's sit with this idea. God always. Not everything you push away is bad, and not everything you let in is good. That sounds simple, but most people never stop long enough to feel the full weight of what that really means. You see, there's this critical misunderstanding we carry deep in our subconscious that if we're avoiding something, it must be dangerous. That if we're saying no, we must be protecting ourselves. That pulling away always equals wisdom. That closing the door is self-respect. But that's not always true, is it? Sometimes we're not protecting ourselves, we're paralyzing ourselves. Sometimes we're not drawing a boundary, we're building a wall. Sometimes we call it discernment, but in reality, it's just fear wearing a mask. And fear is clever. It never shows up shouting, I'm here to sabotage your life. No, it whispers. It mimics your voice. It sounds like logic. It sounds like, I just need more time. It sounds like, they wouldn't understand me anyway. It sounds like, this opportunity isn't quite right. But what it's really saying is, I don't trust myself to handle what comes next. So we say no. We withdraw, we avoid. And the whole time we tell ourselves we're being smart. But the truth is, a lot of what we label as protection is actually just fear in disguise. You've got to learn to ask yourself one of the most important questions you'll ever ask in your lifing A. Is this a boundary I'm setting out of strength or a defense I'm creating out of fear? Because one comes from alignment and the other comes from survival. One says, I know who I am and what I need. And the other says, I'm terrified of being seen hurt, exposed, or disappointed again. Let me be clear, real boundaries are healthy. Real boundaries are rooted in love. Love for self, love for others, love for peace. But fear-based avoidance is something else entirely, rooted in anticipation of pain, anticipation of loss, anticipation of failure. And here's where it gets dangerous. When you start anticipating pain before it happens, you begin designing your life around imaginary outcomes. You begin running from futures that don't even exist yet. I've seen people push away love not because they weren't loved, but because they didn't believe they were lovable. I've seen people abandon projects not because they lacked talent, but because they couldn't bear the weight of potential criticism. I've seen people reject peace because it felt unfamiliar. Do you understand how tragic that is? That we could reject joy because we're afraid it won't last. That we could walk away from what we want most just to avoid the possibility of losing it. And this is why the distinction between fear and protection matters so much. God always, because when you don't know the difference, you start cutting off parts of your own life under the illusion that you're taking care of yourself. You think you're setting standards when really you're just setting traps. Traps that keep you stuck. Traps that keep you safe, but small. So what do we do about it? We get honest. Brutally, courageously, relentlessly honest. We ask, am I moving away from this because it's harmful to me? Or because it might challenge me in ways I don't feel ready for? You'd be amazed how often the answer is the latter. God always, because growth always feels like a threat before it becomes a breakthrough. That's just how the nervous system works. That's how ego protects itself. That's how unhealed wounds stay alive. The first instinct isn't always the wisest. That's the hard part, right? We're told to trust our gut. We're told to listen to our body. And yes, absolutely, your body holds wisdom, but it also holds memory. And not all memory is truth. Some of it is trauma. Some of it is distortion. Some of it is outdated programming you never consented to, but inherited anyway. So sometimes your body says run, not because there's danger, but because it remembers a time when something similar hurt you. But this isn't then. And they are not them. And you are not the same. Fear isn't bad. Fear is information, but it's not instruction. Fear tells you, pay attention. But it doesn't get to decide what you do next. That part is yours. That part is choice. And that's the gift, always. You may not be able to stop fear from rising, but you can stop it from ruling you. You can feel the signal without surrendering to it. God always. You can learn to sit in discomfort without self-destructing. God always. And maybe that's what maturity really is. Learning to pause between the trigger and the response. Learning to recognize when you're acting out of fear versus when you're acting out of truth. And choosing to hold steady, choosing to stay open, choosing to say, I see you, fear. I hear you, but you don't get to drive this time. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped assuming that every strong emotion meant you needed to escape. God always. Imagine what you'd become if you stopped running every time something felt uncertain. What if you allowed yourself to be uncomfortable without labeling it unsafe? What if you could hold space for both? This feels hard. Ab, this might be exactly what I need. You're allowed to change the story. You're allowed to examine your reflexes and rewrite the narrative. God always. Just because fear helped you survive in the past doesn't mean it has to shape your future. Just because pushing things away kept you from pain once doesn't mean it's the strategy that will lead you to peace. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away, ask. Not reactively, not judgmentally, but gently and curiously. What am I trying to protect? And even deeper, what am I afraid will happen if I let this in? That question alone can unlock an entire new level of awareness. Because once you name the fear, God always, you shrink its power. Once you see the pattern, you give yourself the option to disrupt it, and that's where real change begins. Not in the absence of fear, but in your ability to rise above it. And if you've spent years convincing yourself that you're just being cautious, or playing it safe, or not rushing into anything, maybe it's time to ask yourself if that's really true, or if you've just gotten really good at convincing yourself that fear is wisdom, because wisdom doesn't shrink you. Wisdom stretches you. Wisdom calls you into alignment with who you could be, not who fear you tells you you are. The truth is, you were made to expand. You were made to open. And yes, that means sometimes it will hurt. Sometimes it won't work out. But pushing everything away doesn't protect you from pain. It just guarantees a different kind of suffering. A quiet, invisible, persistent kind. The kind that comes from knowing you never gave yourself a real chance. So don't confuse fear with protection. Don't confuse avoidance with safety. And above all, don't confuse the voice of trauma with the voice of truth. Because one will keep you stuck and the other will set you free. The pattern problem, identifying repetitive self-sabotaging patterns and where they originate: childhood, trauma, failure, etc. Let me ask you something. How many times have you told yourself, this time will be different, only to find yourself stuck in the same loop, backing away from the very thing you said you wanted? How many times have you caught yourself pushing away love, opportunity, connection, or peace after you spent years craving them? Now, here's the hard truth. Most people avoid your inner world is setting the limits of your outer life. You're not pushing things away because they're bad. You're pushing them away because you don't believe you deserve them. Yeah. You haven't updated the core beliefs you carry about yourself, God always. And so anything that doesn't match that outdated identity feels like a threat, even if it's beautiful. God always. We don't get what we want. We get what we think we're worthy of. That's the fundamental law of inner alignment. If your self-worth is still stuck in the past, if your sense of identity is still tied to your mistakes, your trauma, your regrets, or someone else's voice in your head, then anything that contradicts that, anything that says you are loved, you are chosen, you are ready, you are enough, it will feel foreign, uncomfortable, suspicious. And guess what happens when something doesn't match our internal map? We reject it. We sabotage it. We push it away. God always. It's not that the opportunity isn't real. It's not that the person isn't sincere. It's not that the dream isn't available. It's that you can't receive what your nervous system still believes is impossible for someone like you. You'll tell yourself stories like, they're probably too good for me, or I'm not ready yet, or I still need to fix myself first. But underneath all of that is a deeper, more painful belief whispering, Guy, I'm not worthy. And until that belief changes, nothing else truly will. This is the war between identity and desire. God always, you say you want change, but you've built an identity around being broken. You say you want love, but you've only ever known abandonment. You say you want to succeed, but you were raised to feel like you're always behind. So when love shows up, when growth knocks, when someone finally says, God always, I see you. I choose you. Let's do this. You don't trust it. Not because it's not real, but because, you don't recognize yourself in the reflection of someone else's belief in you. And that right there is the painful irony. People aren't afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of being seen in a way they haven't seen themselves. Because that kind of visibility, that kind of intimacy, that kind of grace, it demands that you evolve. It demands that you let go of the small story you've been rehearsing in your head for years. And even if that story was painful, even if it kept you in a cage, it gave you something, familiarity, identity, comfort, and so we cling to it, even when it's killing us. I know this sounds intense, but I'm telling you, until you heal your sense of self-worth, everything good will feel like a threat. God always, you'll push away the people who truly care. You'll procrastinate on the projects that could elevate you. You'll second guess every compliment. You'll distrust every moment of calm. Why? Because deep inside, a voice will whisper, this isn't for you. This can't last. You don't get to have this. And let's not pretend that voice came from nowhere. Maybe it was shaped by a parent who never saw you, a teacher who tore you down, a partner who manipulated you, a system that made you feel small. And for years, you absorbed those messages until they became the lens through which you saw yourself. That's not your fault. But here's where your power begins. It is your responsibility to change it now. Your self-worth isn't about ego. It's not about arrogance. It's about truth. And the truth is, if you don't believe you're worthy of what you want, you'll keep pushing it away and blaming external circumstances for why life isn't moving forward. But it was never about the world. It was about your window into the world, your mirror, your beliefs. And the beautiful, liberating, terrifying fact is that beliefs can be changed. Not overnight, not with just positive thinking, but with intention, with awareness, with honesty. God always. You have to notice those moments when you flinch at goodness, when someone praises you and you shrink, when something kind happens and you brace for the crash. Those are the micro moments that matter. That's where the rewiring happens. Always. You don't have to believe a new story instantly. You just have to stop reinforcing the old one. So the next time something beautiful comes into your life and you feel that instinct to push it away, pause. Don't act, just breathe. Ask yourself, what part of me believes I don't deserve this? Don't try to fix it right away. Just notice it. Bring it into the light. That's how healing begins. Not by force, but by awareness. And let's go even deeper. Start speaking to yourself the way you would to someone you love. You would never tell a child, you're not ready for joy. You don't deserve support. This love is too much for you. So why do you keep saying that to yourself? Why do you keep withdrawing from life like you have something to prove before you can fully participate in it? You don't have to earn your worth. You are worthy, full stop. And when that truth starts to sink into your bones, not just intellectually, but emotionally, everything shifts. You stop bracing for impact every time things go well. You stop flinching when people love you. You stop interpreting peace as suspicious. Because now, God always, your inner world matches the goodness that's arriving in your outer life. That's what inner congruence is. That's what it means to be open. God always, not just to change, but to a receiving. It's not about chasing more. It's about aligning deeper, about creating a nervous system that can handle joy without sabotaging it, about creating an identity that says, I am safe enough, strong enough, worthy enough to let this in. So if you find yourself pushing things away, don't just look at the thing you're rejecting. Look at the self you're protecting. Ask what version of you still believes this is too much, too fast, too soon. That version deserves compassion, but not control. You don't need to keep living from the wounded parts of you. You can meet them with love and still choose a new way forward. That's the work. That's the path. And it's not easy. but it's real and it's worth it. God always. Because on the other side of that inner transformation is a life where you don't have to fight yourself to receive what you already deserve. You simply allow it, not because it magically showed up, but because you finally believe you're ready, because you finally know you were never too much always, and you were never not enough. You just needed to come home to yourself. God always, the role of vulnerability, why being open is hard, and how avoiding connection or opportunity feels safer. God always. Let's stop pretending we're confused when we're not. Let's stop calling it not the right time when what we really mean is, I'm terrified of who I might become if I actually try. You see, this is what most people won't say out loud. Growth is a terrifying, not because it's painful, though sometimes it is. Not because it's risky, God, oh yes, though it comes with risk. But because once you commit to it, you can no longer hide behind the identity you built to survive. You're forced to confront that most of what you thought were your limitations were really just your habits, your fears, your excuses. So let's talk about self-sabotage, real talk. Because pushing things away doesn't always like slamming a door shut. Sometimes it looks like procrastination. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like being too busy or always starting but never finishing. Sometimes it looks like ghosting opportunities. Sometimes it looks like overcommitting so you have an excuse not to focus. Self-sabotage is sneaky. It wears the face of logic. It disguises itself as responsibility. It speaks in rational tones. But make no mistake, it's a pattern of fear, a pattern of staying small, a pattern of control. Why? Because if you're the one who ruins it, you don't have to face the pain of someone else doing it. If you're the one who walks away, you don't have to sit with the anxiety of wondering whether it would have worked out. If you slow yourself down, you never have to face the discomfort of being fully seen. That's what we're really avoiding. Visibility, vulnerability, responsibility, the E-weight of what it means to show up as who we really are, because when you stop hiding, you have to start living. For real, you have to make decisions that matter. You have to say, this is who I am. This is what I want. God always, and I'm going to give myself a real shot. And that's scary. It's much safer to stay in limbo, isn't it? It's safer to say, God always, maybe someday. It's safer to live in the future where everything is still possible, but nothing is required of you yet. But you weren't born to stay safe. You were born to expand. And at some point, the safety starts to suffocate you. We fear growth because it demands change. It demands loss. Yes, a loss. You don't just outgrow people and places. You outgrow identities. You outgrow stories. You outgrow your own comfort zone. And even if those things were painful, even if they were never aligned, they were unfamiliar, and humans cling to what's familiar even when it hurts. So when you start to grow, your mind will scream, oh, wait, what are we doing? This isn't us. We're the broken one, the quiet one, the one who never gets picked, the one who always fails. That's your identity trying to survive. But identity is just repetition. Identity is just what you've believed over and over again. It's not truth. It's not fate. It's not the full picture of who you are. You're allowed to rewrite it. You're allowed to challenge it. You're allowed to say, thank you for getting me this far. God always, but I'm not staying here anymore. You're allowed to evolve. But here's the trap. We wait to feel ready. We wait for confidence to show up before we take action. We wait for fear to leave before we move. And that day never comes, because courage doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like terror, like sweat, like a racing heart, like doing it anyway. You don't become ready. You choose ready. You don't become confident. You earn confidence through action. And that's the paradox. Clarity comes after commitment. God always, not before it. So if you're pushing things away because growth feels uncomfortable, hear me on this. God always. That discomfort is not a sign you're on the wrong path. It's a sign you're leaving the old one. It's a sign you're stretching beyond your history. God always, you're not scared because it's bad for you. You're scared because it's you, new. And that's okay. Let it be scary. Let it be shaky. Let it be imperfect. Just don't let it be an excuse. You don't need to have it all figured out to start. You don't need a 5-year plan. God always. You don't need a perfect brand. You don't need all the answers. You just need to begin to do one bold thing, to take one small risk, to speak one honest truth. That's how momentum is built, not through massive leaps, but through tiny acts of alignment repeated over and over again. And stop telling yourself you're afraid of failure. You've already survived failure. You've already been through heartbreak, disappointment, rejection, and you're still here. What you're actually afraid of is a responsibility. You're afraid that if it does all work out, you won't know how to hold it. You're afraid of being seen succeeding because success is not just a reward, it's a demand. It asks you to rise, to show up again and again, to own your power, not just your pain. But here's the true thing, you can handle it, even if it stretches you, even if it humbles you, even if it feels overwhelming at times, you can hold it. You can grow into it, God always. You can become the person who sustains what you once thought was impossible. You've just got to stop abandoning yourself every time things get real, because that's what self-sabotage is. It's self-abandonment. It's the moment you ghost your own potential. It's the moment you say, I'm not enough, before anyone else has the chance to decide that for you. It's the moment you choose your comfort zone over your calling. But you don't have to keep doing that. You don't have to keep playing small so others feel safe or so you feel safe. You don't have to keep proving your worth by staying invisible. Let the discomfort rise. Let it stretch you. Let it break the shell of who you thought you had to be. Because the fear will never fully leave, but your capacity to hold it will grow. Always, and that's the point. That's how you move forward, not by eliminating fear, but by expanding your ability to move with it. So stop waiting, stop rehearsing, stop shrinking, stop pushing away the very thing you asked for. Growth is not punishment. Growth is not chaos. Growth is not the enemy. It's the process of remembering who you've always been underneath all the fear and programming. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it requires shedding, but so does any transformation worth having. Your power is not in knowing how it all turns out. Your power is in showing up anyway. Your power is in refusing to let fear have the final say. Your power is in choosing yourself over and over again, especially in the moments you used to abandon yourself. Because you were never meant to stay small. You were never meant to just survive. You were meant to expand, and everything you've been pushing away. God always. Maybe it's not the wrong thing. Maybe it's just waiting for you to finally believe you're ready. Transforming resistance into growth, turning avoidance into awareness, and ultimately into action. Let's talk about fear, not the kind that screams at you, but the one that whispers. The fear that lives underneath the surface, the one that disguises itself as logic, reason, just being careful. The one that talks you out of your future before it even arrives. You know what I'm talking about. The fear of change, the fear of growth, the fear of actually getting what you want. Because here's the truth we rarely say out loud. Success can feel just as threatening as failure. And when you've spent your life in survival mode, when your nervous system is used to waiting for the next crash, anything unfamiliar, even if it's good, feels like a setup. This is why we push things away. This is why we run from the very things we claim to want. Not because they're wrong for us, but because deep down, we are afraid of what will be required of us when they arrive. We are afraid of who we'll need to become. We're afraid that if we step into the next version of ourselves, we'll lose what's left of the current one. And let's be honest, that version, it may not be perfect, but it's comfortable. It's known. It's who you've been for years. It's the identity you've built to feel safe in a world that hasn't always been. So when something new arrives, a relationship that sees you, a career opportunity that stretches you, a dream that begins to take form, your brain doesn't say, "This is exciting." It says, "This is dangerous." Why? Because your subconscious still thinks anything unfamiliar is a threat. That's how it protects you. That's how it keeps you alive. But you didn't come here just to survive. You came here to live, and living, real living, requires risk. It requires stepping beyond the version of you that's always played it safe. It requires letting go of the patterns that were built in times of pain, but are now holding you back in times of potential. This is what fear of success looks like. It's not just fear of achievement, it's fear of identity collapse. It's fear of no longer relating to the people who knew you when you were stuck. It's fear of losing the tribe, the narrative, the excuse. It's fear of standing in your full power and then having no one else to blame if it doesn't work out. Let that sink in. Because it's not just the success you fear, it's the accountability that comes with it, the responsibility, the visibility. You're scared that if you finally let it in, if you let yourself be seen, heard, loved, celebrated, you'll mess it up. Or worse, you'll realize you've been capable all along. Now there's no more hiding behind the story that you're not ready. But listen to me. You're not afraid of success because it's too much. You're afraid of success because it's you mirrored back at full volume. You're afraid of the version of yourself you might have to finally own, the strong one, the worthy one, the capable one, the one who no longer plays small to keep other people comfortable. That's the version you keep locking away. That's the version that's been knocking at your door. Every time you say, "Why do I keep pushing things away?" So here's the hard truth. Your fear of success is not irrational. It's not crazy, it's protective. It's your system doing what it was wired to do, keep you safe from disappointment, keep you safe from the unknown. But what it doesn't understand is that your future is unknown. And that's exactly where your freedom lies. You will never become who you are meant to be while staying tethered to what you've always known. Fear of success shows up in subtle ways. You delay starting. You overthink. You get too busy to follow through. You stay in relationships that drain you. You pass on opportunities because they don't come with guarantees. But deep down, you know what's happening. Deep down, you feel the friction. That quiet voice that says, "You're built for more than this." That whisper that says, "You're playing small again." That pull in your gut that says, "You were meant to fly," but you keep clipping your own wings. And let's be even more honest, there's a strange kind of comfort in staying stuck. Because as long as you're stuck, you don't have to risk being wrong. You don't have to risk losing. You don't have to face the possibility that your dream comes true and it is still doesn't fill the void. That's the ultimate fear, isn't it? That success won't actually fix what's broken inside. That even if you get there, you'll still feel hollow. So you keep pushing things away, not because you don't want them, but because you're not convinced they'll be enough. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. Success is not the thing that completes you. You're already complete. Success is the thing that expresses what's already within you. It's not the prize. It's the byproduct of alignment, of healing, of finally believing in your own worth. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel certain. Stop waiting for someone to come hand you permission. Your fear won't go away, but your courage can get louder. And don't let your past successes or failures become cages. Just because something once worked doesn't mean it still serves you. And just because something once failed doesn't mean it wasn't worth doing. You are allowed to try again. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to evolve beyond the version of you that others are still attached to. This is the cost of growth, letting go of who you used to be so you can become who you really are. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it might mean outgrowing people. Yes, it might mean being misunderstood, but it also means being I-free. It means being in integrity with yourself. It means waking up and looking in the mirror and saying, I'm not hiding anymore, because hiding isn't humility. Shrinking isn't safety. Avoidance isn't protection. They're just fear wearing different masks. And fear only has power when you believe it speaks truth. But what if it's lying to you? What if the fear that says, you're not ready, is just old programming? What if the fear that says, you'll mess it up, is actually proof that you're about to step into something meaningful? You get to choose what voice you listen to. You get to decide what story you keep telling. You get to interrupt the pattern right now in this moment, not when you feel confident, not when things are perfect, but now, because pushing away your future doesn't protect you. It delays your freedom. It delays your joy. It delays the life that's waiting on the other side of one brave decision. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to succeed. You are allowed to stop apologizing for wanting more. And when that fear shows up, because it will, don't try to silence it. Don't fight it. Just smile and say, thank you for trying to keep me safe. But I'm not here to be safe. I'm here to become